Outside of last night's blowout loss to the Lakers, the Pistons have looked pretty good this season. I think there are a few interesting storylines with these guys, a lot of them being in the starting lineup. And I do want to go into a decent amount of detail of each guy in the starting five, and I want to start with Andre Drummond because I think he's, even if he's not the best player of this Pistons team, he's kind of taken on the face of the franchise, and he's still the most interesting piece because it's like, how big is his ceiling really? Can he approach those Dwight Howard levels that people wanted him to get to, or is he more of just a really good rebounder who can just help your team out a lot, but you shouldn't give him the ball like that? He's a very interesting player, and the first thing we got to talk about is just the free throws. He is making them so far. He's around 70% right now. Now, he's not shooting too many. He's only shooting about 2.5 a game, and he hasn't shot any the last 2 games, I believe. So I would hope that his aggressiveness is not being affected by his fear of going to the line, if he does have a fear. But when he is getting there, they're going in as of right now. And I don't think anyone's asking him to be like some 80% shooter. Just get to like where you're at right now, 70%, and hopefully you can just maintain that throughout the season. Because that allows him, one, to just play a few more minutes a game, because he's currently at 33 minutes, which is more than last season. And, I mean, you're able to actually play him down the stretch, which has been a huge criticism of Drummond for a while. So that's good, Andre, just keep making him. But besides that, what I want to go into with Drummond is I think Stan Van is kind of accepting that Drummond should just not be shooting the ball as much. Because number one, he's just flat out shooting less. He's attempting 10.5 shots a game right now. Last season he attempted 11. Season before that he attempted 13. Season before that he attempted 12. And I think a lot of this comes from him just getting less opportunities in the low post, which I would agree with because he's not that good of a post-up player. Has his moment, but he's not very consistent with it. In 2017, last year, Drummond averaged about 7 post-up opportunities a game, so he had the ball in the low post with a decision of either shooting the ball or passing it out to someone. This season, Drummond is at 2.5 post-up opportunities a game. That is significantly less. So it seems Stan Van is just saying, dude, you're not getting the ball in the low post anymore. Which is a very good idea, so well done, Stan Van Gundy. But another interesting one, and this one surprised me, was actually his pick and rolls are down as well, in terms of him rolling to the rim. I mean, he still sets a million screens, but maybe they're not always just him rolling directly to the basket. Because this season, he's averaging 1.6 rolls to the rim a game, and last season he averaged 1.8. So this isn't even a matter of his post-ups being down and his pick and rolls being up. This is flat out, you are not going to be shooting as much. We're going to let you do your thing, which is more hang around the basket, grab offensive rebounds, do stuff in transition, and we're going to let the other guys on this team dictate more of the offense. Now, the interesting thing about Drummond's offense, though, he's being used way more as a playmaker now, because he's up to around 3 assists a game, whereas before he's never even touched 2. And I think a lot of this is coming from him being used as kind of a ball handler at the top of the key, where Stan Van will have Drummond set up at, the elbow or at the top, and either Avery Bradley or Tobias Harris or maybe Stanley Johnson or maybe Reggie Jackson will have some sort of action off ball where they will either kind of do what the Celtics did with Isaiah Thomas last season, where they'll have one dude start from the corner and then come all the way up, get a handoff from Drummond, and then Drummond will immediately set a screen, and then they'll have an opportunity to either attack the basket or pull up on a mid-range jumper or whatever, and that's actually been pretty effective. I also like how in some of these sets, Drummond has taken the opportunity to where if the initial action doesn't work, he's actually been taking the opposing center off the bounce and beating them to the basket, which is kind of cool. I don't know if I would bank on that happening all the time, but if Drummond's improved his ball handling a bit, then that's cool. They also do stuff where they'll have the ball handler give it to Drummond really quick in the offense, and then they'll run right over to him, and they'll hope that their defender isn't ready to beat them to the spot where Drummond will hand the ball off to them. They usually start from around half court in this situation with Drummond at the elbow, and then maybe they're open for a three, or maybe Drummond once again sets a screen, they go to the rim. So Stan Van's using Drummond in some interesting ways. Less post-ups, less pick and rolls, more action with him at the top of the key, passing to guys. His turnovers are kind of high, so I don't know if he's perfect for this role, but as of right now, it's a nice thing to see. And as far as Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Reggie Jackson, honestly, they're all just kind of playing their games, but they're doing it really well. I mean, Bradley, he's mainly just doing stuff that he already did with the Celtics, which is he'll use those Andre Drummond handoffs to do his signature pull-up jumpers. Pull-ups on threes, pull-ups on mid-range. I do like how much they've been using him as a cutter, because the Celtics, they did that with Bradley, but I feel like they kind of just gave him the opportunity to do it, but they didn't really tell him, like, okay, on this play you're going to cut to the basket. It seems like Stan Van is doing that more often. That happens a lot with Drummond at the top of the key, because the center is at least somewhat pulled out of the paint. I would like to think that NBA teams are going to catch on to what the Pistons are doing and they're going to start ignoring Drummond at the top of the key. But if his ball handling is legit, then maybe that won't be the right decision if he can really beat guys off the bounce. So I think Drummond's handle is going to be a big determining factor of how much this Pistons offense can sustain itself long term. But I mean, Bradley's prospering off of it. Tobias Harris is getting some of these Drummond handoffs, although Harris is doing a bit more action with Reggie Jackson, which makes sense, also rhyming accidentally, where Tobias at the power forward position, which is where I think he should be, he's doing a lot of pick and pops with Reggie, and he's not necessarily getting open off of these, but he gets the opposing power forward reeling just a little bit, and because Harris is a good ball handler, he then beats them off the bounce, gets to the rim, and he either finishes, gets fouled, whatever. But he's also been killing it from mid-range, because Tobias Harris, the dude is shooting like over 50% from mid-range this season. 54% to be exact, while attempting about 3 a game. And he was a really good mid-range shooter last year. He shot around 47% on, I believe, about 230 attempts overall. So if that pull-up jumper is working for Tobias, then that's going to be a real weapon against some power forwards who are not really quick enough to defend him. As for Reggie Jackson, he's just playing his game. His mid-range as well as his floater have really been his calling card this season. He's shooting like 60% in the paint. And a lot of that is just action off of the screen and roll, where Drummond will set a screen, Jackson gets in there, and then he can do his thing. Apparently these plays are not considered plays where Drummond is the roll guy, quote-unquote, even though he technically is, so I would say the 1.6 or whatever it is that NBA.com tells me, it's probably a little higher than that. It's just teams are very concerned with Drummond rolling to the rim, so they're willing to give Reggie Jackson some more offense. However, I am a little concerned with Reggie overall, because he's not finishing well from the basket, because he's currently shooting 43% at there, which is awful, and then he's shooting 29% on top of the key three-pointers, which is also pretty bad. And if you're not making your threes and you're not finishing at the rim, I don't think you're going to be able to maintain yourself throughout a season as a good offensive player. So if those don't start going in for Reggie, then the Pistons are not going to be a good team throughout the year. The year which they were pretty decent and they won like 45 games or whatever it was, he shot 56% at the rim that year, so just get a little bit better from there, Reggie. Now we got to talk about Stanley Johnson. He has not killed them. One thing I did talk about is in the offseason was what's the forward situation for these guys. I like Tobias Harris at the 4, but then you got Stanley Johnson at the 3. He's not much of an offensive player, but then I don't really want John Lure in there because he doesn't space the floor and he's not the defender that you really want, even if he's not terrible. It seems like they're just going with, we're throwing the defender out there on some Andre Robertson stuff, because with Stanley and Bradley, I mean, that's one of the better defensive wing combos in the league. Tobias is still pretty okay, and it's just working. But it should be said with Stanley, he's actually quietly been making his threes lately. Like the previous game against the Lakers, he was 3 for 6 from outside. Against the Warriors, 3 for 5. Against the Clippers, 2 for 4. So Stanley is at least showing some improvement on his 3, and if he can just be okay on those, that's all you can ask for given what he's going to do defensively for you. Ish Smith still doing his thing off the bench as a playmaker. He had a really nice moment where he had a wide open 3 and he took a pull-up mid-range, and it made me think of the 80s so much. Langston Galloway can't miss. I expect that to go down. My fear is Reggie Jackson's finishing and 3-point shooting, as well as if Drummond is going to be able to make some centers pay when they leave him open on the 3-point line. But it's going well, man.